Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I was unable to record this study session earlier, so I'm going to record it now. So anyone that missed it can get all the good information we went over. I'm going to be going over the grouping data lab and giving some tips with SQL along the way. First, what is SQL? SQL stands for Structured Query Language. It is the standard language for communicating with relational databases. Why is it important to know SQL? To be a data scientist, you only need two things, and that's one is data, two is science. There's a lot more to it than that, unfortunately. But you do need data. And the vast majority of the time that you interact with data, it's not going to be in the form of a CSV or an Excel file where you just load it straight into pandas, but you're going to be doing some sort of query to get the data. And there's a lot of reasons for this, why you don't want to just store data in CSVs. If you store data in CSVs, someone can manipulate it. If you just stored your data for customer orders or customer username and password in a CSV, anyone could go in there, change it, manipulate it. Another reason data in CSVs, you can't do queries on it, so you can't filter out parts of the data that you don't want. If you have a lot of data, you just store it in a CSV, you have to load that entire CSV in the pandas every time. With a SQL, you could do queries, you can just grab the data that you want. So, and finally, databases can check for data integrity issues. So if we have a column that is supposed to be a specific data type and someone inputs another data type into that column that's not supposed to be there, the database will throw a fit and we'll let you know. So if we have a column that's supposed to be in a integer and someone puts in a text field into it, the database will let you know. A CSV does not care what you put in there. So those are some of the reasons. There's certainly more than that, and I'm sure you guys can think of more reasons as well. So now I'm going to go over this grouping data lab. For a lot of these problems, there are going to be more than one way to query it, to write the query. I probably will not think of every possible solution. I'll probably come really ridiculously close, though. I'm just joking. I don't know everything. Then at the end, I'm going to show you a workflow for how I would use SQL, pandas, matplotlib to solve the problem. So if you want to see that, you're going to have to stick around to the end. And that is what is known as a teaser in the industry. So this lab, the objectives are to write queries with aggregate functions like count, max, min, sum, create an alias for the return value of an aggregate function, use group by to sort the data sets having returned by aggregate functions, and compare aggregates using the having clause. So first I want to talk about this real quick, this write queries with aggregate functions like count, max, min, and sum. So the min and the max, they're exactly as they sound. Min returns the minimum value from a column, max returns the maximum value from a column. And count, average, and sum are the exact same way, exactly as they sound. Count counts the number of rows in a column, average value from a column, sum returns the sum of a column. And this W3 site's pretty nice. It tells you what a select statement is and what a where statement is and all kinds of some fun stuff. So let's jump into the lab. We're going to be working with a database that is Babe Ruth stats, and here is a preview of what it looks like: year, team, league, doubles, triples, home runs, games, runs, RBIs, at-bats, BB, which is walks, stolen bases, strikeouts, and batting average. So the first thing we need to do is connect to our database. And I want to show you what is in this folder. So the index.ipython notebook, that's the IPython notebook we are running. And then we have 3 markdown files. These are related to GitHub when I cloned it, and Babe Ruth DB is the database. So first things first, let's import SQLite 3. That's what we will be using. And then with SQLite 3, we need to make a connection to our database. Do a space, make it a little bit cleaner. .connect, and then the name of the database is Babe Ruth DB, and then you need to make a cursor. And what this does is what I can write my SQL queries in going forward. So we are all good there. So the first query that asks for are count the total number of years that Babe Ruth played professional baseball. So remember, we have those aggregate functions, and for this one, we are going to use the counts. We want to count how many years Babe Ruth played baseball. So first I need to write a cursor execute, and this is what I'm going to be writing all my SQL queries in. And first thing first, I need a select statement, and I am going to select, and I want to do a count on the, what column is that? It is year. So I want to count how many years he played. From, and the name of the table is Babe Ruth stats. And you have to do this fetch all, or you won't be able to actually see the results. So Mr. Ruth played 22 years, and a couple things, I forgot my semicolon. This lets SQL know this is the end of the statement. As you can tell, it still ran, but it's good practice to have a semicolon. You'll see a lot of different ways people write SQL statements. You can do this right here, write it all in one line. It's going to get you the same results. I wouldn't recommend that. I think it's a little bit easier to read for each statement to put it on a new line. For each statement, I also capitalize the SQL words like select, count, from. And one other thing, and I did not do this, is for each column that you grab, I always reference the table. So this is from the table. This says from this table, this column. And you might think that's a little bit extra work, but when you're in most SQL databases, there's multiple tables. So you're going to be grabbing Babe Ruth stats. You're grabbing the year from the Babe Ruth stats table. You're grabbing number of hot dogs eaten in that same year from the hot dogs table. And it can get confusing when there's multiple columns from multiple tables that you're grabbing. So it's, in my opinion, it's good practice, but like we saw, it is not necessary. So now the next query is count the total number of years played with the New York Yankees. So first I need that cursor.execute. This is what I'll write my SQL statement in. And I'm going to do the same thing, count the number of years. Sorry, I have cats and they get their hair everywhere. Babe Ruth stats. Dot year from the Babe Ruth stats table, and then where, and then this time I want to do a where on this column where the team equals NY. Babe Ruth stats dot team equals NY, and forgot my semicolon, dot fetch all. And what did we do wrong here? So I didn't keep my quotes consistent. You can do single quotes or double quotes. They just need to be consistent. And I made a bunch of mistakes on this one, and it is stats. So he played 15 years with the New York Yankees. Now I want to select the most home runs Babe Ruth had in a year. I'm going to use another one of those aggregate functions. So select, and for this one I'm going to use the max, Babe Ruth stats, and I'm going to do that on the home run column from Babe Ruth stats table. So the most home runs Babe Ruth had in a year was 60. So moving right along, I'm gonna make this real quick, then I'll look at what they want. So they want the least number of home runs in 1 year. So in this instance, we're gonna do the min on the home run column. And sorry, I'm forgetting my semicolons on this one as well. So the minimum number of home runs Babe Ruth had in a season was 0. So the next one is return the total number of home runs Babe Ruth had during his career. So cursor.execute. And then I want to do a select. This time I want to use the sum function on that same column, the home run column. From Babe Ruth stats and fetch all. And you want a semicolon, not a colon. So Babe Ruth had 714 home runs over his career. Not a bad career. So Babe Ruth hit 0 home runs 1 year. That statistic may not be indicative of a typical Babe Ruth season if he played in only a handful of games that year. Let's figure out how many games he played that season. Select the year and games from the season in which Ruth hit 0 home runs. So make cursor.execute, and we're going to select the year. And we're also going to select the games from the Babe Ruth stats table, and in which he only hit 0 home runs. So we want to do a filter where the number of home runs he hit was 0. So in 1914, he played 5 games. And I think that's a pretty good way to write that, but I do want to show you some other ways. So we could do cursor.execute, select, and then grab year and games again. From the Babe Ruth stats table. This time I'm going to do where the home runs equals min number of home runs. And I can do this because if you remember earlier, we know that the minimum number of home runs he hit was 0. So it's the equivalent. And I spelled fetch all wrong. F-E-T-C-H. And so misuse of aggregate function min. And I'm kind of glad this came up because I got some information about it. SQL statements, they don't run in order. So the first statement doesn't run before the second statement, which doesn't run before the third statement. They kind of jumps all over the place. And I'm going to want to show both these screens at once. So what's going on here is that when SQL executes a query, the from and joins runs first. So this line ran first. So it's from the Babe Ruth stats table. Then this where statement ran, where home runs equals minimum number of home runs. And this minimum number of home runs is made in the select statement where we're grabbing columns, so it doesn't know what this value is, so that's why it threw the error. And if you look at this, first it runs from and joins, then it runs where statements, next group bys, havings, then finally selects. Where's is the second thing it runs? Well, selects is number 5. Distinct, and then going down, 6 is distinct, 7 is order by, 8 is limit and offset. Let me close this. So there is a way around this, and I'm going to show you some more ways around it. So first make a cursor.execute and select Babe Ruth stats. I'm going to select the year column again and the game column again. Games. This time I'm going to make a new column called minimum, and this is going to be the minimum number of home runs he hit in that from the Babe Ruth stats table. And let's do a colon to close it. Oh, no such column. Well, we want to take the minimum number of home runs he hit. So in 1914, he played 5 games and he hit 0 home runs. So it gets us the same result. However, we ended up with an extra column. So there is another way to do this, and the reason I'm showing you all these different ways is that I'm hoping it's useful, and because maybe one of these other techniques will help you solve another problem that you're working on. So I'm going to do, I want to grab the year and the games column. From the Babe Ruth stats table. Yep. I'm going to do another where statement, where home runs equals, and I'm going to make another select statement, minimum. I'm going to take the minimum of the home run column. And from the Babe Ruth stats table. You know, are all my parentheses closed? This one is closed there. This one's closed there. I think I'm good. And this gets me the same results, 1914 in 5 games. And what's going on here is this query, select minimum number of home runs from Babe Ruth stats, gets run before the rest of it. So that's why this where statement doesn't break. And you'll see some people write queries like this. It's just something good to know about. I think this, in my opinion, is probably the best way to do it because it's specifically asking for 0 home runs. Well, this one's getting you the same. It's getting you the same results, but it's finding it by finding the minimum number of home runs. So the next one, cursor.execute. We determined that Babe Ruth hit 0 home runs in his first year when he played only 5 games. Let's avoid the outliers by looking at years in which Ruth played in at least 100 games. Select the year with the least number of home runs for only those seasons with over 100 games played. Select selects the year, so I need year and minimum number of home runs. So first, I'm going to grab year. And the minimum number of home runs. So I want the home runs column. From the Babe Ruth stats table, where the Babe Ruth stats where the number of games is greater than 100. So 1934, he hit 22 home runs, and just for fun, let's see how many games he played that year. So he played 125 games that year. All right. Moving right along. Let's do the cursor.execute, then we'll read them what they want. And again, I am doing bad SQL here. Always have a semicolon to stop your statement. Select the average of Babe Ruth's averages. The header of the results will be average, which is quite confusing, so create an alias. All right, so select Babe Ruth stats.abg. And then, so this is taking this column, the average from this table, and then taking the average of it. And so this is his batting average per year, and then we're going to take his batting average, his average over his career. And I'm going to create an alias, and they want it career average. And this is just taking this column and just naming it career average, because this is kind of confusing, average of an average. So it'll just be a little bit easier to reference later if I wanted to reference it from the Babe Ruth stats table, semicolon, boom. So his batting average over his career was about 323. All right. So select the team and the total number of years it hits, but represent the results on a per team basis. So first I want to select the team. So Babe Ruth stats.team, total number of years. So I want to do a count on the number of years. Babe Ruth stats.year. And then the total number of hits, so I want to do a sum on that column. I want to take it from the Babe Ruth stats table. So to represent it on a per team basis, I'm going to use this group by statement. And I want to group by the team. Close it. So Babe Ruth had 7 years with the Boston Red Sox where he had 355 hits, and 15 years with the Yankees where he had 2,500 hits. And I can also reference the column that I want to do the group by on by the order of where it was stated. So I want to do a group by on team. So this is 1. This would be 2. This would be 3. I want to do a group by on 1. It's the same results, just good to know as well. So the previous query returned Babe Ruth's Boston stats first. However, the overwhelming majority of Ruth's career statistics came when he played for the New York Yankees. Shouldn't we list the Ruth's New York stats first, write the previous query again? But this time we want Babe Ruth's total home runs instead of his hits. Make sure that the resulting data sets list Babe Ruth's stats as a Yankee first. So cursor.execute. And we want to return the year. We want to return the team first. So Babe Ruth stats.team. We want to return the total years and home runs per team. So Babe Ruth, let's grab year next. Then we will grab home runs. And I'm sorry, we want to do a count on year. We want to do a sum on on home runs because we want total home runs per team. By home run from the Babe Ruth stats table. And this time we want to do it order by. That way we can get the Yankees first because the previously listed Boston first. And I want to order by let's order by the number of years by years. You know, he played more years with the Yankees, and we want to order it descending. So it'll start with 15 and then go to 7. And semicolon to close it. And let's do a fetch all so we can see our results. And so we need to do a group by. We want to group by team. So there we go. So he played 15 years with the Yankees, 659 home runs, 7 years with the Boston Red Sox, 55 home runs. So next, do cursor.execute. So we want to know the years in which Ruth successfully reached base over 300 times. We need to add hits and walks to calculate how many times Ruth reached base. Simply add the two columns together, hits and walks from ... and give this value an alias of on base. Select the year and on base for only those years with an on base over 300. Hint, where won't work here. So select year. So Babe Ruth stats, we want to grab the year. And then we want the hits and walks columns to make that on base percentage, that on base number. So hits plus Babe Ruth stats .bb. We want to set an alias of on base from the Babe Ruth stats table, where, and this is why it's kind of nice to write an alias for some of these functions that we write. Now I can just say where on base is greater than 300. So you had a 19, 20, 21, 23, 24, 26, 27, 28, 30, and 31. And it says where won't work here. There's several ways to write these functions, and I'll show you an instance where will not work now. I should have done this one first. So I'm going to copy this because it's kind of a lot of typing from the Babe Ruth stats table. Now I'm going to do a group by on the year. Oh, group by is 2 words. And now if I do a where on base is greater than 300, and I'm forgetting my semicolons again, it breaks on the where statement. And that's because when you do a where statement, it does not, you can't do them with a group by statement. So if you want to do a filter and you've done a group by statement, you need to use the having clause. And it works exactly the same. And using a fetch all and get the same results. Very nice. All right, so we made it through all the queries. Next, I want to go through like an example of how to use this with pandas and matplotlibs, because we're just doing queries right now and getting this results. But if your boss asked you for something, he's not going to more than likely not just going to want this. He's going to want something a little bit easier to digest. So let's say your boss came to you, and this is baseball data, so it's kind of a really hypothetical problem. Let's say he wanted this exact information, that the years where Babe Ruth got on base greater than 300 times. And that's on base is hits plus walks. So first I'm going to make a cursor.execute Again, execute. I'm going to copy and paste it because we already have our query. This time I'm not going to do a fetch all, and you'll see the reason why. I want to put this in a pandas data frame. So I have my cursor object, and I can put this right into a data frame pretty nicely. And let's do the fetch all in there. And I need to import pandas if I'm going to use it. And while I remember, I'm going to make a plot with this, so I'm going to use matplotlib. .pyplot as plt. And let's make some columns. And on base. So if we look at this data, I'm going to make a bar plot with this because it does skip years. Times data, usually you'll see like it's called a time series or a line plot. I'm going to do a bar plot in this instance just because there's missing. It's not consistent. So it's 28 and 30. So first, I want to set the year to be the index because that's what I want the X label to be. And then I'm going to plot kind equals bar. I want to show my plot, so plot.show. And I want to make it a little bit bigger. It's kind of hard to see right now. So we'll make it 12 by 8. So much better there. And if I was going to give this to my boss, I'd clean it up a little bit. I think the legend's kind of not very useful in this instance. So let's remove that. I'm going to name this plot so I can chain different objects to it. My plot, legend. And I can set visible. And we want to do false. So legend went away. And let's add some labels to it. X label is year. X. I do not know how to spell L-A-B. L-A-B-L. I do not know how to spell, do I? So X label, my plot, dot set Y label, and this is times on base. And then my plot, let's make a title, set title, years, and times on base greater than 300 for Babe Ruth. Next, I'm going to change the font size on this. It's a little small to read. Let's see what 12 does for me. So that's not bad. Font size on you. It's 14 as well. And then for the title, I'll do 16. So much better. So it's starting to look pretty good. One other thing, Matplotlib has all these different styles. So I'm going to use one of those. I'm going to use 538. So it does a custom format. I think it looks kind of cool. And then one other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the color of the bar plots. And I'm going to use the Yankees colors because that's where he spent the majority of his career. And I will use this one. And I'll set the color. So there. So if my boss asked for a specific question using this Babe Ruth stats data, this would be an example of, where is it? Doing the query, putting it into a pandas data frame, doing a little bit of cleaning on it, and then setting the index as cleaning as well, and then plotting it out. So very good. So well done, everybody. If anyone has any questions about this lab, feel free to reach out to me on Slack, and have a great weekend.